I came into entrepreneurship by accident. We started a company, like a bunch of colleagues.
Right.
That was back in 2012. That gave me a taste of entrepreneurship in the sense that you are known for your work.
Financial independence is like extremely important currently in this era, I believe, and especially for the women.
The level of support that women in tech and technology entrepreneurs need is something that is generally not available.
Many of the women leave their jobs. How does your work helps them?
You don't need to have a degree. If you can learn skills, you can make money off of them. The main KPI for us is conversion, and conversion means a job placement.
That's what you're saying, that you measure success this way.
Yes.
How do you think mentorship and networking, this plays a role in women's entrepreneurial journey?
Some of the best developers that I worked with, some of the best engineers that I've worked with, some of the best data scientists that I've worked with are women.
Hi everyone, Assalamu alaikum. This is Mariam Jamal and welcome to another episode of Women Entrepreneurs of Asia. Today on the Founder Interview series, we are joined by a powerhouse from tech ecosystem. She has founded initiatives that have helped and opened doors for thousands of women in technology. She's not just building skills in them, she's building confidence, community, and opportunities for those women. Please welcome the founder of Women in Tech PK and the co-founder of Code Girls, Faiza Yusuf. Assalamu alaikum, Faiza.
Walaikum assalam.
क्या हाल है आपके?
I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming over. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Of course. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thanks. Acha, Faiza, so let's just start with your journey. I asked my guests about their why, the purpose behind their venture, and what led to their entrepreneurial path. And you have had a diverse career. I've seen it. You've been working in the corporate for a time, and then became a founder of, like, I think around 4 startups. Mashallah. So what led you to this entrepreneurial path?
I came into entrepreneurship by accident.
Okay.
It was not by a plan. I was working in corporate and I was working in a company, and the company, an investor pulled out the resources from the company and we all got terminated on the
Oh.
spot. And that at that time I had a team and I was running a team. I was a technical project manager. So I decided that, there were a bunch of things that we were doing together and we would like to continue doing them. So we started a company, like a bunch of colleagues.
Right.
That was back in 2012. So it's been 13 years. That was my first kind of brush into entrepreneurship. It was a service-based company. We ran it for some time. Then we closed it down because it was not a planned organization. But that gave me a taste of entrepreneurship in the sense that starting something from scratch, building a team, and then making sure that you are known for your work. And in that short amount of time, we did some wonderful work, and the team was brilliant. A lot of them, I still work with them today after so many years.
Wonderful.
So that was my first brush into it. But later in life, I got into this space of skill building and women's inclusion in tech. That also happened because I was part of a program that was women focused. It was by World Bank, and it was an entrepreneurship education program. And that program kind of gave me an idea that the level of support that women in tech and technology entrepreneurs need is something that is generally not available. So I got into that space. Yeah.
Wonderful. So what inspired you to, create such communities like Code Girl, then this Women in Tech PK, and there was the Caterpillars, I believe. Like, so, these are, I feel like they're more women oriented, more women focused. So what was the specific reason behind it, to create communities like these, and then, maybe the reason list?
Yeah. So I first started Women in Tech PK in 2016. As I mentioned, that I was part of like an entrepreneurship program. And while I was in that program, I was in the first cohort, and there were 50 women in my class, all coming from like different backgrounds. Some were from lifestyle businesses, fashion businesses, construction businesses. I was from tech. but the solidarity in that room and the kind of support that women can give each other, that was amazing. That I never experienced it. I don't have a sister. I've always been raised by with boys, with brothers. So I never had that kind of, uh, uh, kind of interaction with a lot of women, right?
Right.
And even though I studied engineering from a public university and it was, the class was pretty, gender balanced, still the companies that I worked at, there were not a lot of women. So that made me realize that the support that I received from that program is something that I want to carry forward. And then I was teaching at a university here in Karachi as a visiting professor. And in my classroom, there were 50 or 60 boys, and there were 5 or 6 girls. And the girls would never contribute in the classroom. So one day I stopped them after the class and I said, I want to chat with you guys. And are you not interested in tech? Is the class not interesting enough? You guys never contribute. What is up? It's not like I'm a male teacher who doesn't like women to talk, and my class is like pretty activity based. So why don't you contribute? And one of them said to me that we do not see a career path in tech because we don't know any women in tech. And that was like a gut punch in the sense that I was a woman in tech, and I know so many of them. And they said, we know about Jihara because everybody knows about Jihara, and we know you because you are our professor. But we don't know any women in tech. We don't know if there are any opportunities available for women. And that, on a whim, I went back home. It was the month of September in 2016, and I created a Facebook group where I started to curate members, women who were working in technology or technology entrepreneurship, and just connecting them. It started from there. And it's been 9 years. We have over 11,000 members, women who are working in tech. We have won awards, we've done a lot of work in that area. So that community made me connected with Shamim Rajani, who later became my co-founder at Code Girls. Then I met Hira Saeed via that community. She became my co-founder at Caterpillars. So that community provided a lot of opportunities, not just for the members, but for me also, because I got to know a lot of wonderful women because of it.
I'm sure. Many of us know about Code Girls and Women in Tech PK, but it would be really nice if you could just explain a little in detail for my people.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to do that. So Women in Tech PK is a community. It's a non-profit, organization. What we do is that we have curated a safe space for women. It's a women-only space where we help them with a lot of different offerings. So, opportunities, access to network, access to mentorship, sponsorships, access to conferences and events globally,
Wonderful.
access to work opportunities, because we do partner with a lot of companies who are looking to hire women. And then we also build their digital footprint. Then I started Code Girls in 2018 with Shamim and Dr. Hasnan. And the idea was to basically see that if we can take women from non-traditional backgrounds, like non-tech backgrounds,
Right.
teach them how to code, and then place them in the tech industry. So that was the experiment that we started to run in 2018. And so far we have graduated, I think, over 1,200 women, with 440 of them who are working in the tech ecosystem right now. And then we have a lot of freelancers also, and then a lot of business owners also. That is beside that 450. And then later on, I wanted to experiment with career acceleration and entrepreneurship acceleration for women. Women tend to do a lot of businesses that have social impact.
Right.
They work in education, even if it's a lifestyle business. They're working with artisans. They're working with a lot of people who are underrepresented and underserved. So Hira was already running Caterpillars, and I spoke to her and I said, I want to run a career accelerator. And she said, come join me and let's build accelerators. So we started building accelerators, and for career and for entrepreneurship, under Caterpillars.
Wonderful. You've trained and inspired so many women. Grateful to know. Uh, can you take some unexpected challenges that you had to face while scaling your ventures, and
Hmm.
like how did you overcome them?
Hmm. Um, I think for a lot of women, this understanding that somehow their gender comes first
Mm.
in a lot of situations where it shouldn't be that way is a very unexpected thing. It was very unexpected for me also because as I mentioned that in my home there were
Yeah.
boys, and I was raised like a boy. So so my dad still says that I have three sons. So for me, when I went into that phase of raising money or reaching out to investors or looking for promotions or looking for leadership skills, this was very unexpected to me that people would not look at my qualification or not look at what I'm bringing to the table. Instead, they had questions about family dynamics or about specifically about my gender or things that were really personal. And I have seen men never getting those questions ever. So that's something that has been really unexpected. As I have, grown in my career, now I sometimes have this kind of space to tell people that, maybe that's a little bit sexist of you to ask me if I have kids or not, or something like that. But generally, this is something that's pretty common. And a lot of women don't expect it, especially if you're coming from a family that doesn't look at you that way. And then, other than that, it's also the amount of care work that comes to your life as you grow as a
Yeah,
person.
of course.
So either it's taking care of your own family, like your parents or your significant other or your kids or your in-laws for that matter.
Yeah.
And women do take a lot of most of the burden of care work, and that care work impacts their progress in their careers and in
Yes,
their
that's
ventures.
that's true.
So that these are the things that a lot of us do not anticipate when we are getting into it. Some of them we can overcome, of course, but a lot of it is just a lot of discrimination and stereotyping. Yeah.
No, that's right. The fact that you mentioned that, many of the women leave their jobs mid-career due to, I'll say, societal pressure and then the additional responsibilities, be it marriage, kids, whatever.
Hmm.
So, like, how does your venture actually, how does your work, I would say, helps them?
Hmm.
Like, how does this venture would, benefit girls?
Hmm. This is my favorite demographic, by the way. Women who are married, they have had kids, and now they want to, after raising them for a few years, and now they want to come back.
Come back here.
And that is my favorite demographic, because a lot of these women are really, really serious about the work because they've seen it all. They've gotten married,
Yeah.
they've gone through the tough part of settling in, they've gone through the tough part of bringing kids into the world, raising them from infants to toddlers, and then school going, college going kids. So now when they come into career, they're very, very focused on making money or making a name for themselves. A lot of them are doing it for identity reasons also. So that is a demographic that I've seen in our programs in Caterpillars, also at Code Girls also, because all of these programs we do not have an upper age limit. So there is a lower age limit for the program, and that is 18 years, but there is no upper age limit. So you can be 50 or 55 or 60 and you want to learn how to code, you're more than welcome. We do say on the website, I think 40 or something, but generally we don't care about that. So this is the demographic that wants to come back and do something, and they really understand the importance of financial independence. So I we love to work with them, and we see that the conversion rate for these women is higher than the younger girls because when they come in, they are really serious about making sure that they are sending their kids to better education institutes. They are securing their future and stuff like that.
With all this, of course, we know that financial independence is like extremely important currently in this era, I believe, and especially for the women, right? So, how do you think skills, the tech skills, unlock this thing?
Hmm. So when we think about women empowerment, I don't know how old you are, but I'm nearing 40. So in my younger days, when we heard about women empowerment, we heard about Silai machine, we heard about beauty parlor, we heard about sectors that a lot of them were informal, minimum wage, low amount of money, a lot of back-breaking sort of labor. But we know eventually all of us realize that tech is a sector that is really skill based. So you don't need to have a degree. If you can learn skills, any type of digital skills, you can make money off of them. Number two is that a lot of these skills are really highly paid and sought after. And number three is that it doesn't require a lot of equipment. So you need to have a computer, a connection to the internet, a place to sit, and then work from there. So that is why technology skills are really important. But it's not just about technical skills. You also need a lot of professional skills coupled into the programs to make sure that women are able to find work opportunities. And that financial independence, where you are able to build wealth for your family, you are able to upgrade your lifestyle, you are able to contribute to your family and get that seat at the table that is generally not there for women. It's really important. And I also think the flip side of it is, because we see that there is usually a man in the house who's doing all the money making. What if the person gets sick? What if they are laid off? What if they want to take a career break? What if they want to take a health break, for example? Men also do not get that opportunity to kind of, take a breather, because they are 100% responsible for everything related to money.
True that.
Right?
Right.
So it's really important that both people, so for a unit based family, so for example, me and my husband, both have to work so that they can take care of their homes together. The environment is democratic in a way that there is no one person making all the decisions and calling all the shots. And at the same time, if I sometime decide to take a break, or he wants to take a break, or maybe pivot, or maybe go back to school, for example, so they have that kind of freedom to do that. So financial independence is really important for not just for women, but it has a huge impact on families overall.
That's so true. The thing you just mentioned is actually very true, and nobody talks about it.
Yeah.
Nobody says that, maybe they also need a break.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's a fact,
Hmm.
I'd say. Apart from that, what do you think are like the biggest, I'd say, structural barriers that are, holding women back in Pakistan's tech sector?
So there are a bunch of very good policies. We have seen a lot of laws and bills that came out of the Senate and from the upper houses in the country. But implementation is a problem. Just creating a bill is not enough. Just saying that everybody should get a maternity leave is not enough. Or people should get paternal leave, for example, or parental leave, for example. So there are a lot of things that are still missing. So companies generally are not, hold account. They are never held accountable for not providing the things that they are supposed to provide. So these things hold women back. You also will see that the minute that the organization realizes that a woman is about to get married or about to start a family, the way that they treat her is completely different, right? So there are a lot of policy related issues. There are more issues around implementation, and there are a lot of issues when it comes to changing the mindset of people. So even if you create like the best policies in the world, but there is no implementation, you're still in trouble. If you are implementing them really well, but people are still treating other people really badly, the problem still exists. So it's a very complicated problem, in a sense that you have to fix a lot of things from a lot of different angles. At Women in Tech PK, we do a lot of policy work. Also, we work with Pakistan Software House Association. We have done a lot of government consultations, also things like that, to kind of put that agenda forward in terms of, start thinking about these things, also be more inclusive. And it's not just women, people with disabilities. It's about, trans people, for example, people coming from areas that are generally not covered in the way that things should have been covered, right? So these conversations are really important. We have been doing that for a while. But at the same time, it's a very complicated problem that requires a lot of work from different ends.
How do you ensure that your ventures don't just train women,
Yeah.
but also, connect them to the real world job and opportunities.
Um, that again, we when we collect data for Code Girls, the main KPI for us is conversion, and conversion means a job placement.
Right.
So when I told you the stat about the organization,
Yeah.
I said we trained 1,200 something women,
Yes.
and we placed that amount of number. So for us, that placement is really important. And there are at Code Girls and both at Caterpillars, there are structures in place to make sure that this happens. So Code Girls has over 120 partners. All of them, support the organization one way or the other. A lot of them send us job opportunities. A lot of them send us infrastructure. A lot of them send us training support or curriculum support. So that is something that we really believe in, because you will find a lot of training programs throughout the country. Everywhere you'll find a trainer and a trainee.
Yes.
But the idea is that is conversion happening? Are people for me especially, are these women able to make money? That's my way of seeing success of the program.
That's what you're saying, that you measure success this way.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm not going to question you this because you already answered. So how do you see Pakistan's tech ecosystem, working towards the diversity and inclusion? Like, is it getting better, or do you find it like still on the surface level?
It is getting better, 100%. There are some really wonderful organizations who are really looking into being really inclusive in Pakistan in the tech ecosystem. There are I've known a lot of companies. I can name a few for you. So Temples, Contour, Arbisoft, and there are a bunch of others, right? These are the companies that are really, really passionate about bringing all the talent, to them. They hire throughout the country. They hire a lot of women. They have a lot of facilities for women in the organization. They have a lot of facilities for parents in the organization. So men also, be it daycare or be it a lot of other things. Flexible working hours is something that is really important also. So it is getting better, but again, the progress is not that exponential. It's very, very linear. So I've been running Women in Tech for 9 years, and in 9 years I have seen the stats move only a little bit forward. So from 16% to 22%, it's not a lot
I'm sure.
in 9 years yet, right? So we do see a lot of visibility, a lot of awareness, a lot of Women's Day events and Women in STEM events, but at the same time, um, it's not enough. Absolutely, yeah.
You've already worked on various startups, right? So, and I'm sure that there are times when you face setbacks, failures, right?
Yeah.
So, what is your advice for such founders and such entrepreneurs who are facing such challenges in their journeys to motivate them?
I think this is something that I've done also, and I later on, when I became older and I had a bunch of mentors and I, talked to a lot of other people who coaches and stuff like that. A lot of us embed our own self-worth into the work that we do. So the company becomes us. And if something goes wrong there, if the venture is not doing well,
Yeah,
it starts to affect us in a way that shouldn't happen. There is no decoupling available in the sense that, this is my work and this is who I am as a human being. So when things get rough, a lot of us get into a lot of trouble. I have started companies. I have closed down companies. There were some that I closed down because I thought it was not the right time. There were some who just failed, and I remember that I wanted to just dig a hole and stay inside that hole forever at that time. But eventually I learned that this is part of life and nobody cares. Nobody cares, right? It's just you who
Yeah.
cares about it. So you have to make sure that there's a certain degree of separation between you and the work that you're doing. And it's really hard to achieve. By the way, I have been working with a coach and a therapist and a mentor, a lot of other people to kind of learn to do this, because the work that I do is also in the social impact sector, right? So that is even more emotionally draining, and you can get compassion fatigue, and you can get really upset about things. And if something goes wrong, you feel it at a personal level, because I work for women and I am a woman myself.
Right.
So that level of separation, that degree of separation, is something that I tell every entrepreneur, that build that kind of resilience for yourself. Otherwise, it's not for you. If you're somebody, if the venture fails and you sit in the corner and you sulk for like your whole life and you don't build something else, then this is not the path for you.
Right. As you just mentioned about mentors and
Mhm.
mentorship. So, how do you think mentorship and networking, this
Mhm.
plays a role in women's entrepreneurial journey?
So, to be very honest, Mariam, traditional networking sucks. The way that people do it, that you go to an event and give somebody your card, and then, nobody calls you ever. You
Yeah.
don't meet that person like ever. You don't even remember if you have
Yeah.
ever seen that person, right? That is broken. But what is really valuable is curating a tribe for yourself. This is something that I've done for myself over the years, that I've created like a personal board of advisors for myself. And I have become part of other people's, personal board of advisors, where if things get rough, I have a bunch of people to reach out. I can reach out and I can just give them a call, be it, I'm stuck because of money, or I'm not doing well emotionally, or I have a troubled employee and I don't know how to deal with them, or I'm looking for a reference somewhere, for example. So you need to curate that tribe for yourself. Otherwise, it's a very lonely journey, and you will get burnt out and you will make bad decisions. So I have done that, and I keep on telling people that the way to do that is to basically spend time with that person and invest yourself in that relationship. It's not about having a million people or knowing a million people. It's always about knowing the right people. A few people,
Right.
but the right people who can take your name in a room full of opportunities, people who can give you good advice, people who can cheer you on, people who are happy for you, genuinely happy for you. So I think mentors and having like a tribe for yourself is absolutely important to make sure that you achieve what you want to achieve and you stick to your purpose, whatever you want to do.
Would you like to mention any of the mentor of yours?
So the first mentor, by the way, that I had was Jihara. So
Right.
I was part of that women entrepreneurship program by World Bank. That
See.
program, so that program had a component of mentorship, and they assigned a mentor to everybody. And she was assigned as my mentor.
When?
So that was my first brush into mentorship. We had a bunch of meetings and we had a bunch of calls, and it was great. And after that, slowly and gradually, I started to just collect people, including her. She's still part of my advisory board, but I started to collect a lot of people around me. I've mentioned Shamim. She and I, we work together again. She's somebody that I trust with my life. Same goes for Hira and I. We run a company together. Same level of trust. Sukana, she's a very close friend of mine. There are a lot of people that do not work directly with me, or not even the same industry, but I know that they have certain level of expertise in certain area,
Right.
and that relationship is always there, that I can fall back on that. And of course, it's vice versa, so they can also fall back on me whenever they want.
Right, right. I tell my guest every time when they come here to bust a myth. So I want you to bust a myth as well. Any cultural myth that you've heard or seen about women in tech.
Hmm. That women are not technical enough. This is something that people keep on telling women. Oh, you won't understand it. It's very technical. Some of the best developers that I worked with, some of the best engineers that I've worked with, some of the best data scientists that I've worked with are women. And not because I picked them because they were women, because
Right.
I know that they are the best because I worked with them. And I worked with a lot of people. So stereotyping is a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you keep on telling a child that they are stupid, they will internalize it.
Right. That's
So if you'll keep on telling women that you can't learn it, you don't have it in you to learn it, or you're not technical enough, or it's too difficult for you, they will also internalize it. And this, in our society, this starts very young, when girls are really young. So it starts from there. So they internalize it, that I won't be able to do maths, I'm really bad at counting, I can't do accounting, I can't do economics. You've heard things like that. I can't do calculus, for example. That is not true. A lot of it is not true.
I'm sure, I'm sure. And then we also specify this thing that, financial space is a more male dominated industry, and the tech space is again a male dominated again, yeah.
Yeah, women do use.
I don't-
Women do use.
It's right, but I don't know why that's always, said. Okay. So what advice would you give to young women in Asia who want to build some, impactful ventures in tech,
Hmm.
right? But still they feel that they don't fit in.
Hmm.
So what would you advise them?
Not fitting in is a great superpower because you'll build something that nobody else is thinking about. If you think you don't fit in, go for it. I 100% of the time think that I don't fit in because of a lot of reasons. I'm a neurodiverse person and a lot of other things also. So I know that I don't fit in. Absolutely fine. My mind works differently. I'm wired differently. I think differently. I've built things that nobody else has built. So if you think that you are somebody who feels that you are an outsider, feeling like an outsider is a wonderful creative push. So utilize it 100%.
Great advice. I take it.
Thank you.
Okay. So before we let you go, we're gonna have a quick fire round with you.
Okay.
So here are the questions coming to you, Gaza. The first thing you do when an idea hits you.
I write it down.
Great. Okay. One woman in tech, global or local, who inspires you?
Lisa Su, CEO of AMD.
Okay. One app you can live without.
Asana. Asana is an app that I use to manage my life. So if it goes away, my life is in shambles.
All right. So coffee or chai?
Both.
The best advice you've ever received.
Trust your gut.
Great. What's harder, coding a tough problem or convincing society that women belong in tech?
Oh, convincing society,
Yeah.
100% of the time.
Okay. One Asian women entrepreneur you'd love to collaborate. Like other than me, you could name anyone. Okay. Yeah.
I would love. There's so many of them. Oh my god.
I just helped you out, and other than me. So yeah. Okay.
I think in still I would say Lisa Su. I've seen her journey. I've read about it, and I've seen the wonderful work that she's done. And she's built things from scratch. I would love to work in something around semiconductor technology. That would be so cool.
Great. One tech tool you cannot live without.
Tech tool. Google Sheets.
One mistake every entrepreneur should avoid.
Not putting their self-worth in the company.
What's more intimidating? A tough investor's question and answers or Karachi's traffic?
Karachi's traffic every day.
Okay, if you weren't in tech, what would you be doing?
I would be a teacher or an author.
Wonderful. Okay, one word to describe our women entrepreneurs of Asia.
Smart, resilient, 100%. Yeah.
Okay, Faiza, to end this, I would like you to share one book, one habit, and one belief with us that every entrepreneur should build.
One book I would say, The Hard Thing About Hard Things. It's written by Ben Horowitz. It's a bunch of stories about tech companies, but a brilliant book. Everybody should read it because it teaches you about dysfunction and company and culture, etc. One habit is to make sure that you're somebody who journal, who writes things down, who basically does a brain dump every day. And one belief, I think that belief should be that you can learn anything. You're smart enough, your mind is elastic enough for you to be able to learn anything.
Thank you so much, Faiza. We have this present for you from our official gift partners, Dabur and Vatika. And you guys should also use Vatika because it has all natural ingredients. Thank you so much, Faiza, for sharing your journey, your vision, your challenges with us. It's just great to know your story. And also to my people, if this story inspires you a little, if this conversation inspired you a little, please share it with the women who needs it. And I always say that we should start over. If you have an idea in your mind, start over. That is the key takeaway today. So keep building, keep shining, keep leading with heart. This is Mariam Jamal and signing off. Until next time, Allah Hafiz.